I'm kind of, and we could talk about this. I don't want to give away my whole thing. I think Spirit's getting bought by Frontier again. I
No way.
Yeah, yeah,
No
yeah,
way.
yeah,
All right,
yeah,
all right, all right.
yeah. We'll go
All right,
back
all
to
right.
it.
All right. Let's get the official ball rolling.
Okay.
And then we could talk about that. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Autopilot On Podcast. I'm Scott, John's with me, and it's just the two of us today, and we wanted to get another episode out, and we got a couple good things to talk about. How you doing, John?
Dude, I'm doing good. I'm back in the Big Apple once again. It seems like I'm here every single podcast episode, but that's just how it rolls. And we were going to record earlier this week, but life got busy, and Scott has some cool announcements in his own personal life going on. So, what happened, Scott? You buy a house? What's
I bought
going
a
on with
house,
that?
man. Bought my first house,
Very good.
and yeah, so it's just been nonstop. Anybody who I'm sure who's bought a house understands how much work it can be. I knew it was going to be a lot, but it's all consuming. And I had to go back to work this week, so I just didn't have the time to get some stuff done. We tried to squeeze a pod in, and I just wasn't in the game. So today it worked out a lot better. So I'm glad we're doing it.
100%.
Yeah,
Me
and
too.
yeah, man. So
What are we going to talk about
today
today?
so we got a few things. We're gonna do we'll start off doing a Spirit update, and then we'll touch on the ATC delays that have been happening and a little bit of reason behind why that's happening, and then we're gonna discuss since both of us had real busy lives lately. We figured it'd be appropriate to discuss time management and life balance. So we'll have a little discussion on that. So I think let's get started talking about Spirit. Tell us what's going on with that.
Welcome back to the weekly Spirit update. Seems like news is dropping every single day. If you listen to aviation podcasts, you're going to hear everyone talk about kind of these big ticket items. But honestly, it's good and bad news. I think for Spirit in general. Spirit came to court. I think it was on Friday. So I can't remember the day, but basically what the court decided and agreed upon or approved, I guess is the best word, was a deal with AerCap to basically bring back 27 airplanes and return those to AerCap, which gives them $150 million of fund of cash. And there's probably more technical ways you can put this in terms of how the cash was deployed, but $150 million of liquidity, basically. And then also, Spirit is set to meet, I believe, on October 16th. So it might be the day this is coming out, or it might be right after this came out. And you'll have to listen for next episode on what kind of happened on the 16th. But that is the big one where they have 87 different airplanes they're trying to get rid of. So the end goal, Spirit is going to be down to 100 airplanes, is what their plan is going to be. And they're at 217 right now. And I believe they have 168, 170 airplanes that are currently within their network actually flying that aren't grounded. So they have about 70 actual airplanes that are going to be exiting the fleet. And something that's interesting is, we have this furlough that came in October. I think in September it was announced, right, for hundreds of people. Scott, do you remember how many there were? Was it 270 they were going to let go again?
Something like that. At least a couple hundred more for sure.
Okay. Well, I'm going to explain the point. If you want to just check on that, I think if you just look it up really quick. And so, anyways, going forward, I don't know what their staffing is, but other airlines is around 14, 15 pilots per airplane for the low costs. If you generalize that throughout the European model or the American model is around 14, 15. And now obviously that can change depending on airline, but let's just keep that as a hypothetical. That would mean they would need only about 1,400 to 1,500 pilots total.
Mm-hmm.
I think as of right now on the seniority list, they have 2,400.
Mm.
From buddies who are there still, they said they're losing about 100 pilots a month as of right now. And this is the peak hiring time for people to leave for a legacy airline. So I don't know how much they're going to count on the attrition to continue to spike, but if they still need what is that? So 2,400 minus that's almost 1,000 pilot differential
Mm-hmm.
of what they really need. So it's going to get really interesting, man. I don't know. I don't know what the future holds for them, but we talked about right before getting on the pod of I'm kind of back to thinking that Frontier is going to buy them. And I think the reason why is I started going through, there has not been one airline since deregulation that has scaled to profitability, and every single one has executed what Spirit is doing has been bought. If you look at
Hmm.
America West and US Airways, it was the exact
Hmm.
same thing, not the exact same thing, but it was similar to this. If you look at what's it called, ValueJet, and who's in Atlanta, Southwest bought them.
Oh, AirTran.
Yeah, so if you look at ValueJet and you look at AirTran, it's the same kind of ordeal. So this has happened multiple times, and I really think that, I listened to the Airline Confidential latest episode, and they had Doug Parker and the gentleman that orchestrated the Northwest and Delta Airlines merger, which was what kind of set off all the consolidation in the last 20 years in the United States airline industry. And basically, what this gentleman said, I can't remember his name, is that in order for the ULCC model to work, you need scale. You inherently need scale to make this model work. And so if Frontier can go in there and buy the most basically a fire sale price of what they were willing to pay for back in 2022, and they can basically dictate, hey, your labor contract is going to be gutted. You're only going to have 100 airplanes that are going to have favorable lease terms, and it has synergies exactly with the cities that we want to focus on. And we also are taking all these 320, the Neos airplanes, and I'm like, man, you know what? Maybe this is what their whole plan was of being able to get all these things right size of all the pieces of Spirit they want, because this has never happened where you scale to profitability. And so something I wanted to bring up was there's still $200 million of excess cash that is within this DIP financing, debtor in possession financing. So the financing is from the current bondholders and creditors that have already funded and hold notes for Spirit. And
Okay.
so if you look at the way the financing is put in place, is they're giving them just enough money to make it to these next couple benchmarks. And if they don't like the terms of a standalone plan and there is no M&A offer, then they just won't give them the rest of the money.
Hmm.
So they don't have to. And I think the way they're going to structure it, again, I'm not an M&A specialist. I'm just looking at it from the outside looking in, is that they're giving enough money that they can recoup their losses if it required them to liquidate the company of some sort or be able to go and convert those notes into a monetary way of extracting the money from the company. So, in my opinion, they've gave $150 million from AerCap, and then also they gave an additional. I can't remember how much money that the DIP financing has been for right now, but the $200 million is one tranche is $100 million, and I think that is December 7th is the due date on that one. So the way that is set up is either they have approved a reorganization plan, or there has been M&A interest to their standard of liking, meaning that the money has been released. And there's $100 million also put into executing the plan of reorganization or the transaction of M&A to occur. And I'm like, man, it's specifically saying out there, yeah, they could reorg and try to do it again. But if you look at their EBITDA and their actually cash flows, they're going to be basically negative to flat for the next 2 years. And I just look at it from the creditor standpoint, being like, why would you try to risk this when you know that there's probably a better deal to be had? And just like all these other guys I'm looking at from the kingpins in the industry, they're saying they need scale in order to succeed. They need scale to be able to do the low cost model because in order to spread the cost out, they need to continue to grow. Yeah, so let me read you the article that just got published. So this must have just happened. This is from Yahoo Finance. Spirit Airlines wins $475 million lifeline to stay airborne amid second bankruptcy battle. And it basically goes through saying that I'm going to read just some of the key points. The bankruptcy court approved a deal giving it access to $475 million in fresh financing while pushing ahead with a major lease restructuring with AerCap Ireland, which is the leasing company, it's the largest one in the world.
Hmm.
$150 million will come from AerCap specifically. This would unlock $600 million of liquidity within the company. And then right now, like I told you before, there's $200 million that is made available to the company immediately. So the next tranche will be $50 million subject to the second tranche is gonna be $50 million, and there's subject to a potential 25 on or after November 8th if aircraft sales do not close, condition on a consensual agreement in principle, AIP, with the
Mm,
ALPA union for the contract, basically,
mhm,
or the filing of a 1113 motion, which basically means the judge will axe the contract to whatever he deems fit.
right.
The third tranche comes on December 13th, $100 million contingent on either an indication of interest in respect to an M&A transaction, merger and acquisition transaction, or a standalone plan of reorganization acceptable to the bondholders. Now, the fourth tranche is actually going $100 million towards the completion of an M&A transaction or a plan of reorganization acceptable to the bondholders. So, like, half their money is tied to either them exiting the bankruptcy or actually getting bought. Unlike before, the M&A transaction is stipulated as that is what they're looking for, is either to exit or to get bought out.
Hmm,
And I just see, the guy who owns Indigo Partners, Bill Frankie's a very smart guy. And, he went down to Fort Lauderdale, and then a couple days later they're in bankruptcy. And then now all of their different levers are being pulled to kind of right size the company to get bought out. And I don't see any other way that they kind of make it on their own with what their projections are going into 2027. But hey,
hmm.
I mean, that's me. I mean, what do you guys think? The listeners, what do you guys think about Spirit Airlines? Do you think they're going to actually make it through bankruptcy? Do you think they're going to get bought out? Is that Frontier, or is that more standalone plan and they're going to go out it alone? And so we'll see. But going back to the last point I want to make was they're going to have to do another furlough at some point, if depending on how many people leave and how many people don't, because they'll really only need 1,500 pilots. That's 900 pilot differential from what they have right now. But that number is dropping every day with people leaving. And then they also do have the 240 people that are going to get furloughed come, I believe, December. I can't remember the exact dates, but the next month. Actually, no, I think that happens in November, not December. So I don't know, Scott. That's kind of my ordeal. I go back and forth, but I think that if Frontier can get a deal on them, why not? Why
Hmm.
not buy them for a couple millions, millions of dollars instead of billions of dollars, and you get scale in the correct cities you need them, and you also have your own scale that you're bringing online as well. It's going to be really interesting to see, but I really do think we're going to have answers by the end of this year based upon those financing terms of when that money needs to be deployed. We will know what will happen to Spirit in the next month and a half, basically.
Okay.
So by early December, we're going to know what's going to finally happen here.
So the money they'd get back on their orders, was that deposit they had put down, that 150-ish mil?
I would have to look at the articles. The
Okay.
viewers to the podcast, we will put that information in the show notes or on the screen or a link or something that you can find it. I read a couple articles that explain exactly where the money was coming from, but
Okay.
it's lease returns to AerCap, 27 of them. And Cranky Flyer actually has really good graphics on these as well that show exactly what leases Spirit is trying to reject. So again, we'll put those up if we can find them for you. I mean, what do you think
Cool.
though? What's your opinion?
When we started down this saga at the beginning of the year, I was we were so sure on the direction it was gonna go. It just hasn't
I know.
it hasn't gone that direction. I mean, the bankruptcy happened and all those things, but, like, we expected them to be bought by now or gone or something, and they keep somehow they just won't die, you know? Like, and I don't wanna say that derogatorily towards any employee there, I just mean, like, they've defied all the odds of what everybody thought was gonna happen to them, you know? And so at this point, I'm dumbfounded. I don't know where it's gonna go. I feel like every prediction I'm gonna make is gonna end up being wrong. So, I feel bad for all the guys that are getting furloughed. There are gonna be more coming. I know Horizon, I think, was the only other company that's really tried to shrink to profitability when they killed the Q400 fleet and stopped hiring for a while, but they were a subsidiary wholly owned by Alaska, right? So they had that support network. Spirit doesn't have that. So, they could try to shrink to profitability. Sounds like that's what they're going to try to do. Here's the thing. They can cut all the waste they want, but they're still not changing the business model. Have they? I mean, I haven't seen any change in anything they're doing other than cutting and shrinking.
Yeah, I understand your point of view. I still think that when you get the efficiencies in place and you actually bring your model to scale with no other competition in the correct cities, because really, man, I mean, you're half the size. You really think about the key markets for the low cost stuff. You can pick up all the Fort Lauderdale stuff along with Detroit and maybe one or two other markets. And that's
Hmm,
what those are really good markets for low cost stuff. And then you combine that with Frontier's sale leaseback stuff being all paid up front
hmm.
for the aircraft deliveries of, again, I don't think that's been reported. And you look at it and be like, man, like they could be at 400 airplanes and by not even what, so Frontier has 197 by the end of next year. So they'd be at 300 airplanes by the end of 2026. And I'm like, okay, well, if they get their revenues up, I don't see why they couldn't do it.
You're talking about Frontier or Spirit right now.
Both, if they
Okay.
combine.
If they
It,
combined. Okay.
yeah. Yeah. So we'll definitely see what happens. I mean, these are just off the cuff thoughts. And I honestly have went back and forth probably 3 or 4 times. I think everyone has. And to be honest, man, there's like 3 people probably that know. They're all either, the chairman of these companies or they're the people in New York City where I'm at right now making the deals at some major financial institution, actually creating these deals. But, you know, there's something to be said that, these guys who keep giving the money, I think it's Pacific. There's a couple different groups that were mentioned in that Yahoo article that we'll link below, but they keep giving the money, but then they get moved up in the creditor line for getting repaid. So they're putting more
Yeah.
money into it, but they're also getting secured basically that their money will get put back into them or their money is whole. They will be made whole if anything were to happen and they couldn't make it work. So I
Hmm.
understand from that point of view too, but I'm like, man, I just feel like something's up in some of these things and I would have to think like a business person outside of what the pilot thinks, being like, what makes the most sense? And when airlines get down to this point and they shed all this, what happens? They usually get bought. That's
Yep.
usually what happens.
Historically speaking, yes.
That is what
And
historically
and
happens.
and Frontier would make the most sense to do that given their business model and Spirit's business model.
Yeah, another
Yes.
thing I thought about too is like, okay, well, again, this is kind of off the cuff, just an assumption, but all those planes that are going to go back to AerCap have to get retrofitted to go around the world. What's stopping Frontier from coming and saying, "Hey, we'll give you a really good lease. We'll pay you for those planes, just a really good lease term on those airplanes, and then be able to sublet those for even cheaper because it's the
Mm,
most cost efficient way for AerCap to deploy those airplanes." And so you start doing those kinds of things and you start thinking like Bill Franke built an empire with a lot of these different things. And I'm like, I don't think people give him enough credit. And I also think that there's a lot more going on behind the scenes with the potential of the levers being pulled and
oh,
the way they're,
always.
yeah. And so I think it's yet to be seen. And I think that I could be completely wrong, but I think that people are going to be kind of shocked once the final terms get settled and we know what's going to happen to them. But I do not
Yeah.
think it's gonna be Spirits, fades off into the sunset and does kind of a slow closing of the doors, if that makes sense. In my heart, I just do not see that happening, and I think that there's a plan to be executed on that we're finally going to get closure on by the end of this year. So we shall see. The podcast will be the
Yeah.
first people to know. And,
Yeah.
the OGs will remember every step that we had, and you guys can go back and listen to what we've kind of thought throughout the process. Maybe Scott, maybe we should put together a little, like, compilation at the end of the year
Compli
once and see how the Spirit saga has went. I think that'd be kind of
That's
a
actually a
fun.
great idea because now I'm at a point where it's like if I'm being honest, deep down, I don't think Frontier's gonna buy buy them at this point.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't. So I think we finally hit that. disagreement point, or
I
no,
know.
where you're gonna go one way, I'll go the other. We'll see what happens. This is exciting
It
because
is
it's like
exciting.
I just don't see it at this point. They've tried so many times and it hasn't worked. I don't see, you know, having looked at Bill Franke and seeing his stuff, he doesn't want to get debt. He doesn't like debt.
But
He's
he just offloaded
anti-debt.
all the debt. He just offloaded 117 airplanes from their fleet that all were debt heavy, and he's
Yeah.
gaining the operational efficiencies at the correct price, at the correct size, and now a labor contracts that are reduced. Those are all the steps that were required that
Mhm.
Bill Franke needs in order not to absorb the debt. And
Well,
that's the point.
hopefully, at some point we'll find out what happened in that meeting, in Fort Lauderdale.
Well, you know what's interesting, Scott, is he actually you can't find his tail number anymore. He blacked out his
He
tail
blocked
number.
it after that.
Yeah, he blocked it. So something happened there, you know?
Yeah, there's still ways to find that. There's still programs you can use to see all the tail numbers, the ADSB
Okay,
tails. So, it's
interesting.
still, you can't see it on FlightAware, but if there's certain services you can find it on. So,
Okay,
yeah. So, interesting stuff. We'll see
okay.
how it unfolds, I guess, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So,
What's next, buddy?
well, I guess we should touch on the ATC stuff with the shutdown because it's October 13th when we're recording this. The government shutdown started a couple weeks ago. It's still going on, and there's been a lot of mainstream media uh just talking about this. I think they're trying to use it as a political tool, but they're not talking about the realities behind how the air traffic system works. So the big thing is, you know, air traffic control, FAA, especially controllers, the ATO, air traffic office, is a essential group. So, a critical essential, I can't remember the terminology, but during government shutdown, they continue to operate and they're guaranteed back pay for everything. So once the shutdown ends, they just get back paid immediately for all of it. So all the guys working, they're still getting paid. It's just their check's going to be delayed until, the government stops fighting amongst itself and figures it out. But there's been some, I think, misinformation about why some towers have gone ATC 0. Go ahead. Do you have something?
No, I would love to know because, man, I've been so busy lately. I have not even really felt the impact right now. And I'll tell you my side of things in a minute, but I've seen the TikToks of Burbank and the pilots asking them like 5 different questions. I'm like, they're ATC 0, dude. Like at 4:15, it's not that difficult to understand the concept of it, but they make it seem like this super unsafe thing. But at the end of the day, I think a lot of pilots are just fine executing. Hey, we're on the visual approach runway, whatever.
It
And
goes to a CTAF, yeah.
yeah, it's not that big.
That's what
It,
happened in Vegas when that one controller had whether it was a medical issue or whatever, and they just stopped listening to her and turned it into a CTAF
yeah,
because they knew she wasn't in control. And Vegas is a big ass airport, and they had it just fine. So
which is
they're,
pretty cool from a professional
yeah.
side of things as aviators. The fact that we can operate and not really need them in some cases when everything goes downhill, I think is really cool.
So, it's important to remember, like, to all of the student pilots listening, to everyone going through their primary training instrument commercial training right now, everything you're learning in that training environment, you don't think so at the time, but your basics always apply, even at the airline or the corporate level. There was one night I was at Ontario Airport and it went ATC 0. We landed, tower was open. We went to the gate, pushed off the gate, and as soon as we push off the gate, they went ATC 0, which never happens usually there. And so it just turns into a CTAF. We had to call SoCal Approach, get our release, and he gave us our release time. And then we made our traffic calls and departed the airport. And, you're like, oh, I haven't done this in a while, but all those things you learn in your primary training, they still apply. And so it's important to know, for any general public listening who's not in professional aviation, that we are all trained to handle these situations. So having a control tower that's open and working allows the airport to handle more traffic because the controllers are able to control that traffic, right? But especially IFR traffic. When there's no tower, then the approach control or the center that's working that arrival, inbound and outbound IFR traffic, they're limited on how many arrivals and departures they can do. It's usually 1 in, 1 out. So, I mean, we go from, 40 an hour to, maybe 10 an hour, which is crazy bad. It slows everything down dramatically. And airlines can't just cancel and go VFR. They have to follow the IFR rules. So, the big thing is efficiency. It affects efficiency, but taking it back to the original point, the whole reason this is happening is not because of the government shutdown. What's happening is Burbank Tower, for example, it was already critically understaffed before the government shut down. So what had happened was they were critically understaffed, which means that they work shifts in these towers, right? There's X number of people that need to be on shift for them to be able to run the tower. Whether that's depends on the size of the tower, it's multiple people. Well, if you're critically understaffed, it means you're running at your min crew. So if one person calls in sick, then you can't run the shift. You don't have enough controllers. And they try to call somebody in on overtime, no one's available. So that's what happened at Burbank. But because of the timing, the media is trying to portray it as a political tool for the government shutdown. And it's like, that's not what happened. What happened was somebody was sick. People call in sick all the time and towers go ATC 0 all the time, but because it's all under the spotlight right now, because it's a good talking point, and then trying to scare everybody into air safety. Airspace is safe. Safest airspace in the world, bar none. It's just that they're trying to use it as a political tool. And the reason
I mean,
a
is that
tower,
surprising?
well, I mean, no, but I figured I figured because even all the social media stuff I perused isn't addressing it this way.
No, totally.
Isn't addressing it
Totally.
with the fact. And, even the aviation stuff that we follow that should be giving the facts about this, they're not. They're still pushing this fake agenda that the mainstream media is pushing to try to make one side look bad. And it's like, man, look, that's not the case. I want the facts to be out there, and this is why I love community notes on X, because you can put the facts out there, right? But and that's what I'm doing right now. It's like, no, the air traffic system's not shutting down and it's not operating inefficiently because of a government shutdown. The government shutdown does not apply to the air traffic system. Everybody in that system in the ATO office is considered a critically, what's the term? Do you remember the
An
term?
essential worker.
An essential. Thank you. An essential worker. And so, when I was a controller, I went through government shutdown. And we still went to work. And when the shutdown ended, we just all got back paid. That's just how it works. So I just want the general public and people and, even professional aviators listening who might not know the depths of it to understand. It has to do with, some people were starting to speculate, oh, well, maybe they're doing sick outs at NATCA. And it's like, no, they're not doing work actions. I doubt that. They're not. It would be very unwise of them to do that, and I don't think NATCA would end up pushing something like the number one, they wouldn't end up pushing like that. And number two, I don't think they would tolerate any controllers doing something like that. If you get sick, you get sick. You're going to call in sick. We're not allowed to go to work if we're sick and unable to perform our duties. People are going to call in sick, and that's going to, be, they've been pushing that, oh, we hit our hiring goals. We hired all these controllers, right? All they did was give them something called a temporary offer letter. So that means these people were selected to be hired. I'm moving into another subject right now, but while I'm rambling, we're going down that road. So yes, the FAA hired a bunch of people, but that doesn't mean that they're going to the academy. That means they've been given something called a temporary offer letter, a TOL, which is contingent upon them passing all the pre-employment stuff, which is months and months. It took me 2 years to go from a TOL to a final offer letter, an FLL, because that's how long it took to get through the hiring process. So all it means is these people are now in the hiring process, but they're not hired. They've still got to go through all the hoops. So, and the academy can only pull so many people through the academy at a time. And the washout rate's still going to be probably pretty high because to my knowledge, they haven't lowered the academy standards, and they definitely should not, because that's how you're going to start putting airplanes together. It's The academy standard has to stay the same. So, for example, when I went through the FAA Academy in 2017, the washout rate for en route, which I was in, was 77%.
That's insane.
I mean, 77% of the people that
It's
went
not
to the
easy.
academy didn't make it through. It's extremely difficult. It is one of the most difficult things I've ever done. So it's not for everybody, and it shouldn't be. And that's just the academy washout rate. Then when people go to their facilities, there's still a decent number of people that wash out of the training at the facility. So just because you made it through the academy doesn't mean you're safe. You have to make it through training at your facility, which takes, depending on where you're at, anywhere from 1 to 3 years to get fully certified. And so I just want everybody to understand the reality is it's like, okay, they're hiring people, but they're still in the pipeline. And there's still going to be, 1 to 2 years probably till those people get to the academy. And then the academy is several months, and then they have to go to their facility, go through training at their facility. And then so you're looking at 3 to 5 years before you have fully certified controllers that get hired today. So that's the reality.
These problems won't be fixed overnight. And I think
No,
those are great points to make.
no.
And, I said that it's not surprising how they're framing that stuff, but I also want to give viewers my perspective on today. So I flew in from Atlanta to JFK. That flight has probably 15 departures per day at a peak time of like 9:15 in the morning. I don't know, sometime in the morning. I had no flow control. We were cleared for departure on time arrival. It was gusting to 45 knots in JFK, 2-mile visibility, heavy rain during a government shutdown in the most busy airspace in the world, some of the most busy. So I'm just like, you can believe what you want, and I'm sure there might be areas that are more felt than others. But, outside of Jacksonville Center, like Tracon and New York airspace, the Northeast airspace, it's probably the most saturated airspace in the country. And we didn't have any flow, which was surprising actually on a Monday. Keep in mind, it's a Monday, which is a huge day to go up to JFK. So, yeah, man, I think that people need to look at the facts and not what the talking points are. And
Exactly.
so those are Scott and I's opinions, along with the facts of, I mean, if JFK is not feeling an impact on that sense, other than sick calls, which occur, especially during flu season and allergy, all those things. So
Yep.
I think people also forget to realize that we are human beings too, and we get sick just along with everyone else at the same time of year as everyone else. So, and then, Scott went into it takes 5 years to correct these types of issues. It's not an overnight thing that the government's going to pop back on and everyone's going to get paid and everyone's coming back to work and it's going to be fixed. Where,
Right.
these things take time. That's
Right.
a great point, man. So I hope everyone can
Yeah.
take some wisdom through that.
Yeah. I just want to make sure, I just want to get that out there so everybody understood. And, any, I'm sure we have people that are not professional aviators that listen to this podcast. And so, it'd be good information for them to see that, hey, oh, okay. Not everything that, you know, that that television news tells me is factual, and here's the reality from the source.
W I would love to hear what the viewers think too. So definitely give us a comment in our YouTube or Spotify, wherever. I'm really curious to see what was your perception of how the media
Mhm.
framed it. And then also, based upon what we're saying, how do you think that how do you think that how do you think the media is covering this story versus the actual reality of kind of what Scott and I are talking about? And I would be curious on, do you think that the media has a right to kind of, what's the word? To cover more honestly, I guess, in not a political manner. So I'd be very
Yeah.
curious to see what you have to think.
Yeah. And again, I'll throw it out there. Anybody from NATCA who's listening, come on, send us an email, direct message us. We'll go out of our way to do an episode with you. Um let's move on to something I want to talk about today. Given that John and I are so busy lately, we figured it'd be a good time to talk about time management and life balance, in our industry, whether you're in the corporate side or the 121 side, airline side of things.
Or even flight instructing. or
Yeah,
being a
sure.
student, like being a student going through training. I think this really
Yes.
applies to any part of aviation in general.
That's a good point. That's a good point. It really does. Especially in the last few, probably in the last month for me, with buying a house and working a lot and trying to get everything ready for the transition, I've just been swamped, and it's been extremely difficult to try to organize and manage everything to not feel so overwhelmed all the time. Um, and I know, John, you've been working your butt off as well. You're buying a house. You've got personal things at home you're dealing with, and it's hard to. I wanted to get this out there so that there's a lot of people in our industry who are newer, who might be struggling with these things, and wonder if they're the only one that's having it this rough. And just so you know, you're not the only one. We all life gets busy, right? Life happens. Adulting is hard. And
Yeah, it is. Definitely.
so if you're listening and you might be feeling, overwhelmed, just know you're not the only one. And we all deal with that from time to time. And, trying to figure out how to manage your time to to not just let everything fall to pieces is important. For me lately, it's been just accepting, I'm still trying to, I mean, it's October 13th. We did an episode with Connor about a week and a half ago that, I just haven't had time to get the edit out. And as much as I want to, and I wanted to get it out last week, but, with closing on my house and moving and then going back to work after having some time off, I took my laptop with me to work this weekend and was going to sit down and edit it, and I just didn't have time. We were just so, with all the delays and this and that, and I felt bad, that I was like, damn, I really wanted to get that done, but I was like, what can I do? I'll get to it when I get to it, and it'll get out there. I feel bad, and so I've blocked out the time tonight. This evening it's going to be the first time in almost 2 weeks that I'll have just sat down for a couple hours, turned everything else off, and I'm going to sit outside on my new porch with a cigar and edit the podcast because I need to do that. And finding that time, I wanted to do it last week, but I just couldn't find the time last week. So this weekend, I looked at my schedule. I said, I'm doing this on Monday night. That's it. And that's what I'm doing. There's a million other things I could be doing tonight that I need to do, but I have to just at some point say enough's enough, and I've got to take that couple hours for myself to get what I want done, because otherwise I'll just keep driving myself into the ground.
So I want to correlate that to people listening on the audience right now in your life of I'm going to speak of my own personal experience of family. So whether you're a student or a professional pilot or whatever phase you're in, is that life gets in the way and it's really easy to just let things go on the back burner. And in life you have to set priorities, and sometimes things are going to have to wait. So whether it's taking a check ride or whether it's soloing or whatever it is of picking
Hmm.
up a trip or again taking an upgrade, whatever it is, you have to set your priorities in life. And one thing that I'm focusing on right now is where my wife and I have a good understanding of, hey, we are going to the finish line of all the hard work is coming to an end coming up as we close on the house. And I want to be able to provide my family with these X, Y, all these different things at the end of that conclusion so we can start off that process in a right foot. And we're both under the agreement. So we set clear boundaries and clear goals of what we are going to do to get to that goal. But then also realizing that there's other things that are important in our life, and it you can kind of feel like your life is crumbling before you when you can't satisfy everything at 100%. And that's just the way life is. And if you try to satisfy everything at 100% always, it's unobtainable. You're not going to be able to do it at a high level constantly. And I think the first thing that people need to realize is it's okay. Life will continue to go on. And I would say set realistic goals and also start planning your weeks in advance. So, like on Sunday, set aside an hour saying, I want to plan all the big things I need to get done for the week. Because when you actually have a plan and it's on a calendar, it becomes a lot more obtainable to do versus every day you wake up and, man, I feel like the last 6 months have just been a snap of the finger. Like, you know, I don't even know how we're in October 15th because it
Yeah.
just time goes by so fast.
Yeah.
And if you're not careful, I'm running a half marathon on Thanksgiving, and there's been days this week where I'm like, "You know what? I am too tired to be able to put my body through 7 miles of running today." And that's okay. I accept it and move on. And that might be the same thing as, you know what? If I'm working 40 hours a week in my day job and I'm a student pilot, I do not have the bandwidth or the studying to be able to go out and get a lesson in today or, in the next couple of days because it takes a lot of time to prepare for that lesson. And I was a flight instructor. I saw that happen constantly. And I'm like, I can't fault the guy because, we have expectations, but you have to just put that in the front of the week and say, okay, what am I going to do? And how can you make a game plan? Because if you don't have a game plan, then things start to fall apart. And so that's something that Scott and I are trying to work with this podcast because it takes a lot of time to do this. And we know that you guys appreciate us putting it out, but man, it takes a lot of time for us to be able to go through and edit all these things and all that. So just try to find these correlations within your life and know that if you start planning ahead of the week and then also give yourself some grace if things don't work out, then you're going to be okay. But man, life goes by quick. That is for sure. So the last topic we wanted to cover today was you just got out of flight school, you're a commercial pilot, maybe you have your multi-engine rating. Scott and I talk a lot about, oh, you got to go build that experience. Don't fly the pattern all the time. And we've had some people talk to us and be like, well, Scott and John, that's harder to do in reality than what you make it out to be. So we wanted to give some options for people to kind of expand your horizons. And if you aren't in pilot necessarily and you just listen to the podcast, these are the different kind of roles that pilots can do once they get out of flight school to build their time, regardless if they want to go to the airlines to build initial time. So, I mean, what do you think, Scott? What are some of the best way? What are some of the what are some of the ways that pilots can go build their experience after they get done with flight school?
Yeah, I mean, you hear me talk about this a lot, right? I'm always a proponent of not sitting in the pattern for 1,500 hours as a CFI, right? And I get a lot of hate for that. What, oh, it's easier than said than done, right? It's like you said, John. But the reality is, there are a lot of options. I know a lot of people are geographically confined because they have families and whatnot. You could still find things to do. So I built all my time flying skydivers. Um, Around most major cities, within an hour or two drive, you're going to find a drop zone. And, whether it's a 182 or a turbine drop zone, that's a great way to build time. Aerial survey is a good one. A lot of people don't think about that anymore. They hire usually once or twice a year for that. I think October and then once in the spring, I think they do. Um, that's a really unique job. A lot of those, there's some of them where you're on the road a lot, and then the pipeline survey guys, I'd interviewed for a job back in the day for that, and it was, you live somewhere and you fly these pipelines out and back regularly to do inspections. Um, and so you're kind of home based in that sense, but you do have to live in the base. That's an option. Banner towing's one. I met a banner tow guy on one of my commutes a month or two ago, and I gave him my number. Hopefully he'll reach out at some point. That'd be great to have him on to talk about that. That's a crazy one. You get your tail wheel and you all kinds of different time doing that. It's low and slow, but some people love that, right? There's aerial tours. If you live around the Grand Canyon or there's a couple other places around the country that those are popular in the United States and foreign other countries, they're popular as well. Islands, they do a lot of that stuff. The big thing is, just getting yourself out there, keeping your mind open and not just going, okay, the pattern is I go do my thing, I get my CFI, I build my hours, and then I go to the airlines. That that has worked for some people, but it's all timing on that, whether or not it works. So, there's nothing wrong with getting your CFI. If you want to get your CFI, get your CFI. It's a great way to get a first job, but what I want to tell people is just don't rely on that the whole way through. It's a great way to get your foot in the door and start getting your hours, getting paid to get your hours, but then keep your options open. keep your eyes open, keep looking around. I know a lot of guys, what they did was they got their CFI, and then they went and they had a big Cirrus population around them of Cirrus airplanes. So they went and gotten certified as a Cirrus instructor pilot. And then now you're one of the few guys that can sign off Cirrus drivers, right? And so they go do that. Well, most of the guys who own Cirrus airplanes are businessmen, pretty well off. And so a lot of those guys end up getting jobs through that avenue. That person owns another airplane they need a pilot for, or they know somebody. And so they went from being an instructor to now they're the personal pilot on a Vision Jet, or that guy owns a Pilatus, or whatever the case is, right? That's a different avenue. What ideas do you have, John?
When you were saying all these, I actually thought of something that maybe is kind of brilliant, maybe not. Maybe you guys have already tried this. What I would do if I was someone getting out of flight school right now, I would go on to ChatGPT or Grok, and I would say, I want you to compile every single list of banner tower, aerial survey, every single type of job that we just listed. I want you to name every single one of those businesses and compile a list for me, along with the phone number if you can, and let you go research those. And just like Connor was saying before, I would go on to all those different ways or all those different businesses, try to do as much research as possible before you pull every single one. And I would either make a plan of going into those businesses. I would start locally first if you can. And I would try to do as much research as possible. And like you said, go meet them in person. And then what I would also do is broaden your horizons to, let's say you live in Florida, maybe go to every metropolis area in Florida that you want to go work at. And I would say compile a list of every single one of employers that you can find. And then I would hop in the car first and I would start banging down every single one of those doors, literally, and start researching it. And this is what I think people have a problem with is they might just they might just walk into a business, not really know much about them. If you want to get hired, and I see a lot of these posts on Reddit, and they're like, I can't find a job 6 months later. Well, did you take this seriously? Have you been spending 8 hours a day trying to find a job? Because I think this is the way that people should find a job is they should go and basically compile every detail they can possibly do on each
Mm-hmm.
company and say, this is how I'm going to fit into your business, and this is why you should give me a shot. Okay,
Yep.
that doesn't work they might work once in 100 people. Okay, well, maybe that takes you literally 3 weeks to do. Now you have a job. And
Yep.
so you start doing this and you do it until you find something. And I think that you have the power of AI to use all of these different compatibility. You have all these different tools in front of you to be able to be as efficient as possible and to be able to market yourself. So maybe that's a good video I should do is that Scott of my weekly video. If I can put that out, being like, this is how you find a job. I'm going to walk
Yeah.
through how you should do this because to be honest, I don't think there's anything out there other than us talking about saying go start knocking on doors. But there's
Yeah.
more strategy involved into that. So yeah, I think that's honestly what I want to create because there's so many people right now at that lower rung of the industry that just do not have that ability or the framework to be able to go out and do that. And if you do right now and you have that same idea and you say it's not working, maybe you can learn something from me in that sense, and maybe you can give me different opinions on the things that have worked for you. So I'd love to hear from the listeners. What has worked for you for going from flight school and landing your first commercial airline or first commercial piloting job? Because I think there's a huge misconnect within the public of what it takes to land that first job. And we really want to help you guys out there.
Yeah. And you're right, John. I mean, using AI is a valuable tool. And the time when you were talking, I did a Grok search and I have it on the screen now. And it broke it down by the type, the minimum hours required, the differences, the pay, all the notes. And in a matter of seconds, it gave me this list. And so in your video, you can expand on it more in depth. But um, yeah, the tools are out there,
They're free.
nowadays.
They're free,
I mean,
guys.
no better time. You've no better time to have access to information to excel your career than we have today.
Yeah.
In the past it was all tribal knowledge, and now you can just quick search on one of these AI programs, and at your fingertips you have, decades of knowledge
Exactly.
that people didn't before. So, yeah, you're at an advantage, everybody. You utilize the tools, and I think that's the point of this, is to help you find these tools that are available to you to help you succeed in your search and your advancing your career.
100%. And I think that people are going to find a lot of success coming into 2026. So that's my plan for some time in the next week or so, is maybe that's the new video, is doing that. But I want to do one last segment before we end the pod. And that's going to do with how to deal with people, how to deal with captains or vice versa with major age differences, and using a specific model that I've kind of used it. How do I say this? There's a specific model that's came out probably 20, 30 years ago called the Ford method, and it stands for family, occupation, recreation, and dreams. And I want to focus on how you can connect to someone that you have nothing in common with in the flight deck. And for me, I'm a very talkative person, so I love to get to know people, and I'm very curious about different points of view. And, I don't disagree, or I don't agree with a lot of people and a lot of things they say, but I find it fascinating the way they think and the reason why they think. And so I kind of just want to leave you, the viewers, with this. If you start talking to someone you don't really have much in common, and you work through, oh, do you live close to the airport? Do you like stuff? If you watch Living the Dream video on YouTube, do you like stuff? Go through this model with them and say, start with their family, be like, oh, are you married? Do you have wife, kids, whatever? Get to know them on a personal level, and then start asking them questions about their family. So, do your kids play sports? What part of, and just segment each one of those different groups and find out, and you can get to know someone probably within 30 minutes. And one thing I want to bring up too is people love hearing themselves talk. And so people love talking about themselves. So if you can get them talking about themselves, most likely they're going to find you a lot more enjoyable to be around, because they like to express and they feel validated in their feelings and who they are. And especially older men don't really get the opportunity to talk about those different types of things, whether they're at home or whatever. They usually, their voices aren't heard in that way. So if you can connect with older generation that way, or if you talk about, let's say you're 60 years old flying with a 25-year-old, the same is true, because a lot of those older dudes don't want to reciprocate that back to the younger crowd. And I think you guys can end up being really great friends, or at least great coworkers by the end of the trip. So next time you go flying on your trip, remember what I told you: family, occupation, recreation, what they like to do for fun, and what their dreams and aspirations are. And most people love to tell you about what their dreams are. I just found out from the captain I'm flying with today, he wants to hike the Appalachian Trail with his daughters. And so he's telling me this whole 5-year plan of how he wants to get them into shape, if they want to do it, of course, where they go take 4 months out of the year and they go hike the Appalachian Trail. And I was like, that is so cool. And unless you start asking questions, you don't understand who these people are on the human level. So again, I want to leave those thoughts with the viewers on, go use the Ford model. And I'd love to hear a comment from one of you on next episode on a different story you learned from someone's experience in the flight deck. But other than that, Scott, I mean, do you have anything else to add before we wrap it up?
No, I think that's a great way to wrap it up. John's brought this Ford method up a few times, and I've used it in the cockpit and it works really well.
Good.
So, yep. So, thanks everybody for listening to another great episode of the Autopilot On Podcast. We appreciate y'all. We're on all the socials, and we've got our
2,000
website.
followers on Instagram,
Yeah,
baby. So
we're
thank you
moving
for
on up.
everyone.
Yep. Thank you, everybody. YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Hit the like button, subscribe, comments, leave us your comments, reach out to us via there. We read most of them. And if you send us an email or a direct message, we will respond to you. We really appreciate everybody listening, and it keeps us motivated to keep doing this. So until the next one, thanks for listening.
All right. See you guys.
Bye.